together. Verse number 12, Colossians 3. So, as those who have been chosen of God, holy and beloved, put on a heart of compassion, kindness, humility, gentleness, and patience, bearing with one another and forgiving each other. Whoever has a complaint against anyone, just as the Lord forgave you, so also should you. Beyond all these things, put on love, which is a perfect bond of unity. Let the peace of Christ rule in your hearts, to which indeed you were called in one body, and be thankful. Let the word of Christ richly dwell within you, with all wisdom, teaching and admonishing one another with psalms and hymns and spiritual songs, singing with thankfulness in your hearts to the Lord. Let's look at that phrase, hymns. We sung some hymns this morning. Spiritual songs. We just got through with some spiritual songs. Singing with thankfulness in your hearts. We just got through with Thanksgiving season, didn't we? Still enjoying it. To me, it's all tied in through the weekend, and this day today is still Thanksgiving holidays. And a little bit, we're going to leave here, and we're going to go out to my mama's house, and we're going to have our family get together today for our Thanksgiving meal as a family. Some of you will be doing the same probably. Let's read on here and finish up this part. Verse 17, whatever you do in word or deed, do all in the name of the Lord Jesus, giving thanks through him to God the Father. I wanted to do this message last week because it talked about Thanksgiving, but I felt more led to do the other than what I wanted to do in my flesh. All right? Again, last week we looked at things to stop doing, and now today, things to start doing. And in this short passage, he lists two things to put on, and there's also two lets that we're going to look at. Let the peace of Christ rule. Let the word of Christ richly dwell. We're going to look at all those, and in fact, that's coming up in today's message, and next week we won't have time to do both these today, so I've cut it in half. So this first part, put on. He tells us some things to put on. And the Greek word here is one that would be used to clothe, to dress, to put on, like you put on clothes. Well, you put these things on. Put on these things. Who is he talking to? In verse 12, the first part, he tells us different phrases here and describes who he's talking to. Chosen of God, that's us. If you're a born-again person, if you're a follower of Christ, you're chosen of God. Next thing you are is holy. We may not feel so holy sometime, but in God's eyes, because of what Christ has done, not about the best that we can do, guess what? We are holy. Everybody say, I am holy. Let's say it together. I am holy. All right, now, don't look at each other and smile and giggle, but that's the truth. We are holy. And another thing, he says, beloved. We're beloved of God. And so to this crew, believers, he tells us, put on these things. And the first thing he says to put on is a heart of compassion. Heart of compassion. Compassion from the heart, deep down inside. The inward parts is what this Greek word refers to. It would be like the heart, the liver, the lungs. All this would be deep down inside. And this denotes the emotion, heart of compassion, and the emotion of compassion or sympathy. Merciful is another word that would properly define this original word. Of tender mercy. Heart of compassion. He said, put it on. Put on a heart of compassion. Now, this seems to be easier for women folk than it does to be for men folk. You ever notice that? Men are less compassionate, it seems, than women, or anyway, that's the way some folks would say it. But I know one time, growing up, I like telling these old stories, and this is a good illustration. My daddy had this little bitty 1954 F-100 Ford, Terry. F100, 54 model. I think it was a 54. And it was a mint green color. Mama remembers that old thing. And anyway, we had a small farm, and we used to live in Grand Ridge next to the railroad track. We moved out here in the early 60s and last century. And then we began to live on this little farm. And if you're going to farm, you got to have a pickup truck, right? You got to have a truck. So anyway, we had this little old green pickup truck, no extended cab. Those weren't invented in that day. The only, you just throwed all your young'uns in the back, right? And there wasn't any law against it, You could ride on that tailgate, drag your feet, And I remember one day we were hauling watermelons. This was later on. I'll get back to this story. But we were hauling watermelons from Uncle Joe's way down there past Shelton's store on his hill, and headed irrigating. That thing was covered with melons, and so we threw some. He gave Daddy a truckload of them. We were bringing them back, and me and Tommy and cousin Dwayne, and I don't know who else was back there riding with them melons, and we thought, why do youngins have to just be youngins? We wanted to see what it looked like to drop a melon on that highway going about 65 miles an hour down the road. Well, guess what? It looks different. You hit that thing, it splashes and it slides, and you'll see yourself just get ahead of it. So we thought that was funny, so we got carried away, not thinking somebody's going to be watching us in a rear view mirror or a side mirror or something. After about the third one, Daddy kind of stopped, and he wasn't none too happy, all right? This was another pickup. Getting back to the 54 pickup, the old Ford. Back in those days, if you sold hogs or cows, well, you had to haul them, I guess you could have tied them up and carried them, but Mariana was up here behind where the Best Western used to be, that last little hotel on the west side of town. Behind there used to be an auction market. So once every year or so, we would carry hogs up there or cows, and you had to carry them in a pickup or a trailer. Well, I guess we was poor farmers. We always had to borrow somebody's trailer, but before the borrowing stage began, Daddy would build these side bodies. Y'all know what side bodies are? You younger folks don't. Now, I'm going to tell you something you didn't know. In the back of a pickup, you got the body back there, and you got these square holes behind the cab. Further on back toward the end of that body, you got two more square holes. Well, we used to cut 2x to fit in there, and you'd build like a fence with boards and stick that sucker up about as tall as the cab. I said, well, I don't use that word anymore. Anyway, you would build that little fence around, and then a gate, and you would get some cows in there, and boy, what a chore that was. We just weren't set up to be cowboys, but Uncle, and the bodies we built were out of 1x, and so those cows would break them and bust them, and they just weren't any good. So Uncle Joe had built a set, and he loaned us his set made out of 2x4s and oak wood, and with carriage bolts. They wasn't just hammered and nailed together, so it was good and sturdy. But still, getting those cows in there, sliding around, and to get them, I think we would back up the back wheels of that truck. We'd back it up into a ditch on the dirt road. Or build a ramp and get them in there. And they'd slide around with those hooves on that steel bed, and I think sometimes we might have put a piece of plywood or something there to keep them from sliding around so much. But they would make a mess out of that truck when you got it back. Cows or hogs, you'd have to clean it out. We're talking they would go to the bathroom and wouldn't even ask, can I go? They wouldn't say, well, I'm going to lead them to go over a rest stop over here. Pull over. They would just take care of their business and let you have to take care of cleaning up their business when you got back. Well, on one of those times, it was my turn, I guess, and I wasn't a teenager yet, to clean out that truck. So we had to back it up to, I wasn't old enough to drive. Daddy backed it up to somewhere where there was a water hose, and we didn't even have one of them squirt. I always wish we had a squirt nozzle. If we had one, it didn't last long. I remember having to use my thumb to spray that out. Anybody ever had to do it with your thumb? And you just, when you're small, that ain't got much strength as you do when you're big. It's, it was kind of hard. And I was spraying that thing out, and then we would always, take that body out. And so I'd unwire that back part, and it just set up and it had a little gate on hinges, so once you got your animals in there, you close those gates and you got them in there. You lock it up, lock them down. Well, I was pulling that thing out, and it slid and got ahead of me and out of balance, and it came and my hand was caught on that gate, right on top of those bones, and I was yelling for help. Well, Daddy came and he helped me. He pulled that thing out to my rescue and helped me get it out, then ran on off. I kept having to spray and clean that thing out. Anyway, Tommy, my older brother, it wasn't long, he was making fun of me for squealing like a girl. And anyway, you know, he had no compassion, see. If he'd have had a heart of compassion, he wouldn't have made fun of me. And see, Paul is saying here, put on a heart of compassion. You know, when people are in need, don't just say, well, they got themselves in that trouble. I mean, they may have, but we've got to learn, and boy, I'm number one needing to learn this. Put on a heart of compassion, he says. And next thing, he says, well, and I gave an example of what not to do. Yesterday, my wife was concerned about Debbie's family over here, Miss Vernell. And so out of her heart of compassion, she wanted to make sure they had food. So she fixed food, knew I was going to go over here and see them. And she put together a meal from what's the name of that place? Po Folks. She bought a whole bunch of stuff from Po Folks fixed up, and it was a big old meal, and I carried it over there. But that was a heart of compassion. See, she cared, she was concerned about it. And that's how we need to be. Concerned about people and when they're going through tough times, not how did they get there or why did they get there, you know, and maybe they may need to learn some wisdom or something, but in the right way. But we all are to put on compassion. The next thing he mentions here is kindness. Another word could be used goodness, to be kind, to show kindness, benevolence. Actions seem to be the key here, and I guess this one's kind of tied to having a heart of compassion. If you've got a heart of compassion, then when you put that in motion and start doing things, you do kind things out of a heart of compassion. Now, these are things that Paul's saying to put on. You know, it's for us to be proactive about it. It's not just going to be automatic. You know, when you get up and get ready, you young people, to go to school in the morning, you jump out of bed, your clothes just don't automatically appear. Your socks just don't jump on your feet, and your shirt on your body, and your pants, and your shoes on. You got to do that yourself. And Paul says, you got to do this, see? And, you know, if I'm going to paint, you know, what I'm going to wear, what I decide to put on, is determined for me by what I'm going to be doing that day. I think about what am I going to be doing, and if I'm painting, I don't want to wear my brand new pair of jeans that my wife just bought me. You know, she might get mad at me. She might not have compassion like she. But anyway, we need to, you know, think about what we're going to be doing before we get dressed. And so, if I'm going to be doing a lot of stooping and bending and squatting down and working, I like to put on my carpenter pants because they're kind of loose fit, and I can get up and down a lot easier than some tight fitting pants for something else I may be wearing. Or if I'm going to be doing a dirty job, anybody got any greasy pants or stained pants that you use for when you get really dirty? Well, it's based on the occasion. If I'm going hunting, I'm going to be wearing some camo probably, right? Some of y'all have already started salivating. You can't wait to get home and get out there in that stand again. If I'm going to be playing football, and if I plan to lose, I might wear an FSU outfit. But if I'm going to be planning on winning, what kind of outfit do I wear? There we go. I need somebody to have some input. But if I'm going to be out in the sun for a long period of time, I got this old hat, and it's got a hole tore in it, old straw hat. But it keeps the sun off that little bald spot on the back of my head and off my ears. If I'm going to be out there for several hours, I'll get burnt. And so I dress physically according to what I'm going to be doing. Well, Paul is saying, look, this is 24/7. If you're going to be living your life for Christ, living for Jesus, this is stuff that you've got to put on. And we've already named a few. If I'm going to be Christ-like, I got to put these things on. Compassion, kindness, and he names another one. Humility. You got to put this on. It means to have a lowliness of mind about yourself. Mild and gentle friendliness, meekness, and humility is a very accurate word. One of my books I looked into on my computer, volumes of stuff I've got, this is being the opposite of the person who is a know-it-all. loves being the center of attention, always has to be in charge, not teachable, to have a humble opinion of oneself. Now, let's look at the other one, two more. Gentleness. I can get a pullover shirt and have the word gentle painted on it in big letters and put it on, but to put on gentleness in the way Paul is speaking of here is to clothe our behavior with gentleness. It's how we treat other people. Gentleness in an attitude and behavior in contrast to harshness in one's dealing with others. Put these things on. I remember one time when I was about 3 years old, my mama wanted to carry me and Lynn. I think Tommy was in school, but she wanted to carry me for a checkup. I never got sick. I don't know why. If it ain't broke, why fix it? Don't go look at it, But anyway, I guess I must not have been acting right or something. I don't know. Maybe I misbehaved too many times. She wanted to see if there was some medicine they could give me. I don't know. But she took me. I remember it was going for a checkup of some sort. And me and Lynn, Susie wasn't born yet, but she told me, Dallas, put your shirt in your pants. I had my shirt on. I was dressed like this. I had my shirt on. All right? So I went to the room, and I remember I had a T-shirt on, and I took my shirt off. On the outside, I was my mind, a youngin's mind. I'd heard different things. Some people talk about they go for physicals, and doctor asked them to do this, do that. They had to take their shirt off. They had to do this, that. Anyway, I thought, well, it must be something that I've got to do to get my checkup. So, okay, I don't understand it, but I'm going to do what I was told. I took my shirt off, I unbuttoned it, and I stuffed it down in my pants. I just went on in front of my pants, and Mama said, "Where's your shirt?" I said, "You told me to put it in my pants." So I put it in my pants. In my mind, I did what I was told. I didn't understand it, but I was being obedient. Well, we may not understand all these things, but Paul says we got to do them. And here's one more. Patience, you got to put it on. A state of emotional calm. A state of emotional calm, patience in the face of provocation. Now, we know we got emotional calm when we out sitting in the woods by ourselves, or sitting on the bank fishing, or if we just riding down the road by ourselves, listening to the music, or listening to silence, just being alone, state of calm. But this is a state of emotional calm in the face of provocation or misfortune, and without complaint or irritation. I'm not a good example of that. Some of y'all may be. Okay. Let me just ask you, what if I gave you a pullover shirt and it had this written on it? My name is Patience. Capital letters, exclamation point. My name is Patience. Now, when you walked around your family or the folks you know, what do you think their response would be? Would they agree? Yeah, he's got that right. He pegged that. Or no, she ain't got patience. I don't know why she's wearing that, because her name is not Patience. Her name is something else. But Paul says, put this on, and we should put it on, and we should have it just. If we did wear, that would be arrogant. It wouldn't be humility, but he did say, my name is Patience. People ought to agree. They ought to say, amen. Jesus has done a work in that life. That person truly is a patient person. I don't know how that person gets through all they can get through and keep that emotional calm without becoming irritated at some of the things that's been going on. Paul says, put these things on. So clothe yourself with patience and all these things, so that people would say, yes, that fits him, or yes, that fits her. Now, in verse 13, we just got through what he said to put on, and then he tells us how. This is a Greek adjunct here, this part of this verse, and it describes how something is done, okay? And he says the first thing in verse 13, bearing with one another, okay? Bearing with one another. It means to hold oneself up against. It means, another word, enduring. Here's a good phrase, to put up with. You ever have to put up with something or somebody? To put up with. That's how we're supposed to do it. To have patience with. In the sense of enduring possible difficulty. And then the second thing he lists here, forgiving one another. Another way of defining this, to show favor. Also, to give generously. To give grace. Forgive. And he goes on to say about this, a little side note, if you have a complaint, another way of defining that word complaint, to line it with the original, if you have a cause of blame against someone, he says, forgive them as the Lord forgave you. You can't hold bitterness. You can't be unforgiving. You're going to have to forgive. That's just how you put these things on, with a heart of forgiveness, with patience, with bearing with one another, putting up with situations and people. So, how these things, these give us more insight. How these things give us more insight into the context for which Paul was speaking. These things we just named. He had these two things, forgiving, putting up with. It shows that putting on these things is with difficult situations. You've got to put these things on. Put on these things. And then he also gives one more thing to put on with, and we'll start with this one. It's down in verse 14. He says, put on love. Put on love. To have love for someone or something based on sincere appreciation and high regard. To love, to regard with affection, loving concern, love. He says, above all, put on love. This is the same word that Jesus used when he said, I give you a new commandment, that you love one another, in John chapter 13. And in Romans, Paul says in another letter, a person who loves doesn't do evil to his neighbor. Romans chapter 13, verse 10. And we know the passage in 1 John 4, 7, 8 with this same word. Beloved, let us love one another. For love is of God, and everyone that loveth is born of God and knoweth God. He that loveth not knoweth not God, for God is love. He says it's the perfect bond of unity. You know, real love will hold families. It'll hold groups together. It'll hold churches together through difficult times. Paul says, if I give all my possessions to feed the poor, in 1 Corinthians 13, and if I surrender my body to be burned but do not have love, it profits me nothing. Before that, he said, if I have faith to remove mountains but do not have love, I am nothing. He says a few other things about this word love. It's patient. It's kind. It's not jealous. Does not brag. And is not arrogant. Does not act unbecomingly. It does not seek its own. Is not provoked. Does not take into account a wrong suffered. Does not rejoice in unrighteousness, but rejoices with the truth. Bears all things, believes all things, hopes all things, endures all things. Love never fails. How to put on love when a person you're supposed to love. How do you put it on when you find a person that you're supposed to love hard to love? Well, you just do it. You do the actions you normally do if you actually did love this person. And the emotion many times will follow. Just do the actions as if you love that person that you're supposed to do, and the emotion many times will follow. And even if it doesn't, the kind of love spoken here is action. It's more about action. That's why John said in 1 John 3:18, let us not love with words, but in deed. That means action, but in deed and truth. I still don't love as I should, but I know as a younger teenager, I had to learn to conform to this verse. He that loveth not knoweth not God, for God is love. When I first started hearing about that passage for the first time, and it kind of registered in my head and my heart as a young teenager, up until that point, I could name people I didn't like. I could even say words on occasion to certain people at school. I hate you. I don't like you. But after reading these verses and after I'd given my life to the Lord, I had to choose to line up with God and line up with what He wanted from me. And one thing He wanted was love. He wants me to love everybody. We shouldn't be able to say, I hate so-and-so. I love this bunch, but I hate this bunch. No, you got to love everybody. And if you are born of God, you will love everybody. It's going to happen. God's going to love people through you once you get saved. Romans 5:5 says the love of God has been poured out in your hearts, or in our hearts, through the Holy Spirit. We love with His love. It's not our love. 1 John 3:14, we know that we have passed out of death into life because we love the brethren. He who does not love abides in death. And then one final verse, 1 John 4:19, we love because He first loved us. Somebody said a long time ago, you can give without loving, but you can't love without giving. For God so loved the world that He gave, right? And that's because God loved us. Now, He wants us to love others. Jesus said the first and the greatest commandment is this: you shall love the Lord your God with all your heart, mind, soul, and strength. And the second is like unto it, thou shalt love thy neighbor as thyself. He says, on these two hang all the commandments. In other words, all the commandments are about either loving God or loving others. You know, if there's a commandment in place that we're to honor our father and mother, and it's there, guess what? It begins, just love them and you'll honor them. Just live a life with a person that's loving. Let yourself, all of us, let's love. Put on all these things, put on love. Let's stand together in prayer.